Not just plants, not just people, but everything requires water. You make an environment that then all of these things that are flying, they aren't bothering me, they're not landing on me, they're not hounding me for resources because they have resources. They have these flowers, they have water, they have safety, they have a place to, take a break, take a snooze. All I'm doing is lending to the nature, and we both get what we want. That it becomes more symbiotic or mutualism, where I get to experience a yard and a space that I love, but then they also all get these resources that they desperately need.
So irrigation has been my project. And last week when we chatted, I was telling you how I had it all set up. I was so proud of myself. Well, that's not the case.
Okay.
I mean, I've got these soakers, but now I've got water pressure issues.
Yes. Ultimately, soaker hoses put out too much water.
Yeah.
And so we actually try to wean people off. They love soaker hoses because they're really easy. And they are kind of like, they're like the entry level into, creating irrigation, like drip systems. And they're the thing you can just go grab, plug into a thing, and your plants won't die. But then they emit so much water that it messes with your pressure. Irrigation, obviously, it's one of those things where we go back and forth with clients all the time because it's like anything. It's like when Instagram came out and everybody was a photographer, right? It's like when WebMD came out, everybody became a doctor. You know what I mean? Like we could self-do a lot of stuff, and irrigation isn't any different than anything else that's DIY. Not that you can't do it, but you have to learn all of that stuff, like you're talking about pressure. Like, so then when the water is coming out of your system, so you're on a irrigation, right? Like
I do have an irrigation, but I only get to use it twice a week.
Right.
And I set up just from the house.
Right.
So that I can get,
good. So that you can get more consistent.
Yeah.
So like irrigation PSI is completely different than house PSI, right? So like when you're on the city system, I think it's, there's a pretty consistent 60 to 90 PSI, whereas irrigation can go up and down depending on who's watering, right? So if everyone in the neighborhood is watering, you can drop way down, maybe to 25 or 30. And so then that's why then pressure changes, right? So when you're designing an irrigation system specifically to do something that is drought tolerant and be more responsible with water, be more water wise, then you have to understand what your pressure is consistently, and then you can design your system around what your pressure is going to be, right? So if your pressure's averages 40 psi, then you can calculate, okay, that means I can run this many emitters for this long and basically get this much water, right? Because so like on the drip line, you get a gallon of water per hour. So if you let it run an hour, you're going to get 1 gallon of water coming out of that tiny hole. That will spread, however wide, depending on soil type, a gallon spreads. And so then you're then planning your plants around where that water is going to be, right? So then if you have really low PSI one day, maybe it only drips out half of a gallon.
Yeah.
And if those 2 half gallons only seep, and there's a hole, your plant's right here, and they seep to here and here, and this plant doesn't have a bunch of roots yet, it doesn't know where the water is. You know what I mean? Like there used to be this adage that roots look for water. They don't, they just grow. And if they find water, the lottery. If they don't find water, they die. And, and so it's another interesting concept with a plant is when you plunk it, so like this is such a good prop to have. So you can see the roots.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you plant this, you actually kind of rough these up a little bit to make them grow and to not be stay the shape of the pot. So there is a rule when you plant this in the ground. Now this is a much more aggressive plant, so it's going to grow much quicker than just the standard perennial. This is native yarrow. But there's this saying that people use, sleep, creep, leap. So the first year you plant something like this, its roots maybe might go out this far. Now this particular plant, they are going to go up further because that's the type of plant it is. But for the most part, you want to do averages, right? And so first year, the plant is just sleeping. It doesn't go crazy and find water, right?
Mhm.
And if your water comes up to here, and this plant's roots are here, the plant has no idea, you know, and it just dies. And so then, so what we always tell people are like, your plant will be the shape of its pot for a whole season, relatively. Second year, it creeps out a little bit further. Maybe its roots go up to here, you know, and then the third year, if it's been given, so that's why we always tell people, we only guarantee our plants if you water it every day, period, because it thinks it's still in a nursery pot. And the nursery has to water these things a couple times a day, especially when it's hot, right? And so people are like, oh, well, you know, or we'll come back and they'll be like, this died, you know, and it's like, it's all water. Like everything, like the video says, everything has to have water. Everything lives because of water. Same with you, right? If you don't get water every day, you don't last very many days. You know, and you feel like crap, you know, if you don't get it for a couple of days in a row and then you drink a bunch of water, you know, kind of thing. So it's the key to everything. And it's a limited resource. We live in a closed system. And, you know, it's getting dirtier and dirtier and getting more and more full of plastic and chemicals and medications. Like, I mean, it's terrifying, actually.
That is so true.
And then we go buy all these expensive plants and we stick them in the ground and we're like, live! But I'm not going to water you. Or I'm going to water you really inconsistently. Because then people, like you mentioned, you'll have a soaked garden one day. This brand new baby plant is like, woohoo, but that's too much. Now I'm suffocating. Because you can also have too much water. Because a plant has to do the same thing we do. When we breathe in air and blow out air, they're taking in water and getting rid of water through their leaves. Theirs is called transpiration, whereas ours is called perspiration, right? And so they have to get rid of all that water. That's why a plant will wilt sometimes. Is that it's actually like, I get rid of this water quick, it's too hot, and I'm going to boil.
Okay.
And die, you know? And so, or it will wilt because it doesn't have water. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those weird things you kind of have to learn as you grow. You know?
Kind of like setting a schedule, like we do for ourselves. Like if we want to change a behavior in our life, you have to make sure that we do a little bit every single day at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy. Really.
Well, my plan is to try and do something I've done in the past that's worked really well, and that is to make rivers through my garden.
Okay, those are called swales.
Swales. Oh, well, I've had a lot of fun in the past.
I think that it's intuitive.
Yes.
Like we've been hunter-gatherers far longer than we've been the society we are now, right? And so there's this weird primordial thing that we know how to survive.
Right.
And we know maybe how to help other things survive for our survival, you know? Like you're not growing corn, but you're, you know, growing something else, you know?
So yeah, so building up the gradients and figuring out how to make sure that they all get watered. I've been using like the pressure hose to kind of cut the land now, so that when I get it started at the top, it comes through.
Seeps down.
I recycled some garden boxes that I had in the yard that were kind of, they have the slats, so that the water can now like make sure to get a little bit cut down so that it can trickle down to the next one, and then it can trickle down into the rest of the yard. My yard is built on a slope, apparently, so I've just been kind of going with that natural, like removing the area that I did, using recycled cinder blocks to kind of trap in certain areas and then direct it in another. So we'll see how the summer goes.
Yeah. Well, what I think is the coolest thing about gardening, as opposed to having a landscape, is that gardening is all about experimentation. It's all about seeing what works and being excited about, even when something bitterly fails, that you're like, okay, I learned something from that, and now I know I can't use that or I can't plant that.